Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's episode of the Co-working Values Podcast, the podcast of the European Co-working Assembly. And so is there anyone we need to mention before we start?
I don't know. We could mention the people that make this possible, and we can, just skip on over to the Cobot commercial. This episode is brought to you by Cobot, a leading management software for co-working spaces, offices, hubs, and flexible workspaces around the world. One of the best things about Cobot is that it's produced by people who used to manage a co-working space and know the ins and outs of the main problems and issues that are bugging co-working managers. So if you want more time for your co-workers and community, check out Cobot at cobot.me and take your co-working management to the next level. And that was our lovely sponsor for Cobot, enabling us to record the podcast for you every week.
I've got to say, they are my favorite Berlin-based co-working space software specialist,
Yeah, you should have said that co-working space software because they used to run a co-working space and now they, just run the software behind everybody running the co-working space.
So I'm going to cut to the chase here. I'm very excited because there's Kofi who we see around a lot, and there's a whole load of stuff come on. And our guest today, Irene, is the reason we met Kofi and in East London, and is along with all our other buddies in the co-working library and research group for collaborative spaces, is relentlessly researching. I want to say co-working spaces and how they interact with the local community, and that's just blown up. Because how long have you been doing this now, Irene?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Bernie, for inviting me. And I think I'm into co-working spaces since 2017. I think so. When I started my master at the UCL, basically. So my dissertation topic was about co-working spaces. So yes. Since 2017, quite a long time.
Yeah. It is. Can you give a little bit of background? So I'd hate people to think that you were only a PhD student, because there's a lot more to your repertoire than reading books, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I love to say that, to start my presentation, I love to say that I'm a architect and urban design as well. So I think this is quite important to see which is my perspective on the topic. And then, yes, basically I'm Italian also. I think you can guess from my accent as well. So yes, I lived in London for the past 5 years. And in London, I did one of my master in planning. So at the Barrow School of Planning at UCL. When I firstly came out into the co-working economy, so I was fascinated about this topic, and I started to research and doing analysis into co-working spaces in London. So thanks to this inspiring topics, I found Bernie and all the London co-working assemblies. So I think we met for a workshop 2 years ago. Was a workshop in Finsbury Park, I remember, in outlandish place.
It was the Start to Action workshop run by Stephanie.
Exactly that one. Yes. So then, after 1 year of Master of Research, I started my PhD, and now I'm a PhD student. I'm also working as a urban design consultant, and I'm part of the Coast Action project run in Polytechnic of Milan in Italy. So a lot of stuff. Yes. Now I'm based in Italy since the beginning of the pandemic, but yes, my main work is in the UK basically. So I'm still conducting my research both in Italy and in the UK. So yes.
So I always want to ask you, why is this? Because it's very interesting for me, and I couldn't explain why. It just is very interesting for me. But why is this interesting for you? Like this relationship between where we go to work and the local, the impact of it on the local environment, and how the people in that space interact with that local environment?
To be honest, I think that, this is just the story, but basically the story behind is that basically at the beginning I was interested in studying how migrant people, high skilled migrants, were trying to find attachment and sense of belongings to the new space where they settled, basically. So this was my first idea for the research, and then I said, okay, but basically, it's kind of my situation. So I have been a migrant in the UK. So I was high skill at the time, of course, when I moved in the UK. So, and I was looking for a place to work. And at the same time, for me, it was quite difficult to find a place to work and at the same time to feel part of the community and of the neighborhood. So, and I started to find, firstly, I spent some months in second home in Hambury Street, Peterfield. And I found out that basically, the majority of people, they were there just because they needed a space to work, not because they need any kind of sense of community. Probably is also a cultural aspect as well. So I started to be interested to the fact how people interact with the local community and how exactly it works, which are the dynamics and so on. And then I also realized that actually the fact of using those kind of new working spaces, like co-working spaces, especially for regeneration part of the cities and so on, it's quite an innovative topic. So a lot of cities, they are doing those kind of process in terms of regenerations and those dynamics in terms of transformation of the urban space. So basically what I did, I merged my experience as a high skilled migrant in the UK looking for a place to work and for a new community with my background in urban studies. So here we are. So my research about the impact of co-working spaces, but not only co-working spaces, also co-working members. So how members of co-working spaces basically transform with a kind of degree specific areas where the co-working space is located. I think it's quite interesting. It has quite a lot of potentials in terms of also if you think about suburbs or periphery. I think it's quite effective.
And one of the reasons we are talking about this is that you, of course, were involved in the Co-working Library Challenge that happened last week or a couple of weeks when this episode airs. But I'm just looking at it, and the first thing that pops into mind is you focused on London and Milan and New York in your research. And how did you first, what was your impression when you saw that, Milan had 160 co-working spaces and London had 312 co-working spaces? That's a big number for any kind of a city, even, as big as London. So do all of those thrive?
Okay. Yeah. A lot of spaces. And I want to mention something that I also mentioned last week at the Co-working Library Challenge, basically, was that it's quite impressive that London has more co-working spaces than New York. If you study the history of co-working spaces, they firstly were born the space, the co-working space itself, the concept was born in New York, was born in the States. So the fact that now London has more co-working spaces than New York is quite impressive to me. And and I think that also cities, it depends, of course, on the dimension, because Milan is much smaller than London, for example. I think London is 5 times bigger than Milan, something like this. Anyway, the number of co-working spaces is quite high. I think because firstly, it depends on the different, in the new way of work globally. The fact that people are even more high skilled, because a lot of people, they are quite well educated, the majority, at least in big cities, are well educated, so they are more they have more entrepreneurial skills than in a medium or small town. And also because the co-working spaces, they allow a better balance between quality of life, like people that work in co-working spaces, they are looking for a better balance between like life and families commitments and the work commitments. So like also I think it's worth to mention that co-working spaces in big cities, like all the like co-working space is something very complex. It's not, we cannot just talk about co-working spaces. I think it's we need to talk about different typologies of co-working spaces, especially in terms of governance. Maybe it's too academic right now, but anyway, it's the typologies of co-working spaces are really different. So I think that, for example, in the city center or inner cities, mainly there are some big companies such as, for example, WeWork, Regus, or other spaces. While, for example, more outside or in the suburbs, we can find more community-based or community-led co-working spaces. So I think that also with the pandemic now, like right now, the pandemic will push the situation and the shifts in the working culture will be more into like towards co-working spaces and more flexible way of working compared to the office and standard workplaces. But this is this is just my opinion. It's something that we cannot we cannot find data so far because we are still in the middle of this situation. So,
and I also wanted to ask you. So, in your topic, you also focused on community-led co-working spaces. So, what are community-led co-working spaces? What did you put under that hat?
Yeah, I mainly talk about community-led co-working spaces. So it's my typology. It's the typology I choose for my research. So basically, it's there are a lot of definitions regarding community-led co-working spaces, but basically are the co-working spaces that with the aim to support the local community. Not only the community inside the co-working space, but the community in the area nearby. So, and the support, when I talk about support, is support in terms of economical support. So they often, those kind of spaces, they have some kind of pay as you can or some kind of incentives for the local community to go in the space. And also sometimes they support them in terms of for example, they pay less the membership or even they don't pay, for example. But also support in terms of supporting the local neighborhoods for in terms of bridging local communities with the local authorities. That is something like this specific role. It's very important. To me, it's fundamental in a community because sometimes the local authority it's quite unlinked or maybe too far, let's say, from the population of a specific area. So having a kind of intermediate, so having someone or in a way a space itself, that work has this role of intermediate of between the needs of the local community and the objectives of the local authorities, something very important. So those community-led co-working spaces have mainly those roles. The fact of that is something that has not been studied, like community-led co-working spaces is not something that is so there are not a lot of those spaces. Basically, this is the thing. So there are some, but basically they are more informal than structured. So it's also difficult to categorize them into this concept.
Because as you're speaking there's this question spinning around in my head that has come up a lot this year. Is that people don't really, people outside our little co-working bubble don't really understand what what co-working is. And do you remember the event we did at Mainyard Studios with Kofi and
yeah, I was
all those people. So it was an event we did at Mainyard Studios. There was young people who work in who are part of the Urban MBA program. There was Isabel who was working with you, researching on how to, what it actually meant to people. There were people who work in a co-working space, and there were people that run a co-working space. And one of the things that came up there was we just talked about co-working like we talk about Coca-Cola, everyone knows what that is, toothpaste. And everyone was like, sorry, what do you mean? What is co-working? And do you remember the kids said to me, like, why don't you just call it work? I thought, yeah, why don't we just call it work? So there's this issue with the term. And then out of all, the hundreds of co-working spaces that I've, looked up, or, one of the most successful is Space 4, which is somewhere else on this podcast, run by Polly and Outlandish. And there's an enormous amount of effort they've put into the enormous amount of inconvenient effort they have put into not just opening an office and renting it on, in Finsbury Park, of connecting with that local community. And there was a question in here. I'm really sorry. What can we do to, or what is the work that needs to be done for what is now a co-working space or a shared workspace to be, not to just be an office that gets rented out, to actually become, or what could it represent in a local area?
It's this is a tricky question, because, to be honest, I think that there's not a guidelines, or there are not guidelines or a specific toolbox or something that a co-working space can follow in order to reach this goal. I really love that you mentioned Space 4, that is by Outlandish, that I already mentioned, in Finsbury Park. In that specific case, what they did, this space is also part of my, is one of the case studies of my research, so I know the space very well. And they are really good because basically, first of all, I want to mention that the co-working members in Space 4, they are not representative of the local community. So, because they are mainly white people, well-educated, and so on, all those stuff that we all know. While the Finsbury Park population is mainly from North Africa, I think. So the majority is North African people. The neighborhood has been recognized as one of the most deprived in the London metropolitan areas, and so on. So, there is this gap between the community of the co-working space and the community of the neighborhood. So I think what Space 4 did, and what Space 4 is still doing, basically, it's a huge effort into understanding the needs of the local community. So they are working with local residents in running workshops for entrepreneurship, but also to supporting them. So, for example, I know because I was talking with Polly about this, I think a couple of weeks ago. So basically, during the pandemic, the first phase of the lockdown, what the community, what the co-working members did was to support the local businesses in terms of shifting their, providing them with the skill to create their websites in order to sell stuff online. So I think this was really good because they, the co-working members, they put the efforts in order to train with their skills the local community to have something to basically to create something for themselves. So it's not only a way to provide them already with the tool, but it's also a way to training them to be able to create, to develop them themselves, let's say, to develop their business in a more innovative, more technological and innovative way. So this fact, I think, this specific case is one of the more interesting ones, the case of Space 4, because they they did a lot of things. They also have a lot of policies in terms of, for example, those kind of pay as you can or other stuff. So basically, if someone is not able to pay, for example, if I'm a local resident of Finsbury Park, maybe I come from maybe underrepresented background, and I don't know. I want to try what is a co-working space because I don't know maybe what is exactly a co-working space. So I had the chance to try to work from Space for the co-working space in Finsbury Park, and at the same time, I cannot invest a lot of money in this try, let's say. So the fact of also working with the local community and to run events and workshop open to the local community, I think this is a huge effort in order to let them know what is exactly a co-working space and how they can fit into it. I mean, not fit, maybe it's not the right word, but how they can take advantage and take benefits of working or cooperate or collaborate with a co-working space. So,
what we'll do is we will post in the show notes the link that you and Polly did to that to that podcast, and it's that's one of the things that keeps coming up is like the actual words we use. I was on a call with some people setting up a co-working space for the local authority in London the other day, and one of the things was just don't call it co-working, because I mean I love co-working, I love the movement and everything, but outside that people think they need somewhere to work rather than a co-working space. So darlings, I do love the word co-working. I want to just finish up here because we're going to, on the 28th of January, we're going to run an hour-long online event in at 10:30 UK time with around this topic. With Nima from London Business Partnership and the London Co-working Assembly have got together, and this conversation we're having here is like your work and the whole conversation is like an ongoing thing in the London Co-working Assembly. So we're going to have Mandy from Town Square, who are very used to setting up spaces in the with local authorities, and Steve Petts, who was one of the original co-founders of Central Working. And since he stopped working with Central Working, he's been opening incubators and co-working spaces around the UK. And that's going to be led by Tash and Nima. And there'll be some opportunity to talk about or ask questions about your business rates and that never-ending quandary we're here in the UK. So if you head to we'll put a link in the show notes on that, but you can find that on the London Co-working Assembly, and we'll also have work from Irene there. Is there anything else you want to shout out before we go?
I think there are a lot of new spaces that are are emerging in, especially London, those kind of local co-working spaces. So I'm really interested to see how those spaces will evolve in the next month. So let's hope that by January we will have more information about new spaces. So yes, thank you, Bernie.
Is your I should know this before I ask this, but is your work on the co-working library?
Yes, of course. No,
yes,
not the current one, because of course it's not finished. But I have some previous papers and some previous research. So yes.
We'll find that and link to it. Okay. Anything to say before we go, Željko?
No. Just to basically wish everyone a happy New Year. This is the end of the year podcast, and a very merry 2021.
Yahoo! And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, go to coworkingassembly.eu. Wait for, I think it's like 9 seconds now, and a little box will pop up and you can get on our email newsletter we send every week, which has all the research, events, podcasts, and blogs and content we're creating and connecting people around the European co-working scene. And I'm trying to think of, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, and all that type of stuff. Thanks very much, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.